It is a multi-year journey. It is a 3 to 5 year journey. It has to, but as long as it's tied to the 3 or 5 prong pillar strategy, and if you can bifurcate that into bite-sized chunks, and then that further gets dissected into value drops that are potentially quarterly value drops, that then starts to add value versus an initiative that just never is never ending.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. This is Darren Pulsford, Chief Solution Architect, author, and most importantly, your host. On this episode, navigating digital transformation, insights from the C-suite with a partner from PwC, Mohib Yousufani. Mohib, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darren. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we talked the first time, was it earlier this week or last week? I can't even remember anymore.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks now since we...
A couple of weeks. Oh, okay, yeah. There you go. And I was very interested in your guys' perspective on digital transformation, especially at the C-suite, because I've been talking to people at mid-level and grunts, right? The individual contributors about digital transformation. Now it's good to hear someone at the other end of the spectrum that's advising C-suite about digital transformation. But before we get started in this deep discussion, every person I have that comes on my show is a superhero, because I would never have anything less than that. And every superhero has a background story. So Mohib, what's your background story? What makes you a superhero?
Hey, thanks, Darren. That's a great question, and I am a partner with PwC. I have had the privilege of working through many transformations and helping turn around businesses, both large-scale and medium-sized businesses across consumer markets and financial services companies on how do you really turn around businesses? How do you reinvent business models as the consumer preferences are changing, as market forces are changing? You've heard a lot of disruption in the marketplace. You've heard a lot of consumer sentiments changing and consumer loyalty as changing and preferences switching from brand A to brand B, etc. So with all that in the midst, what do? Remove the noise from the marketplace, remove the noise in the ecosystem, and how do you really start to advance and push the needle forward? So having been there, done that now for several years across multiple companies, and having those scars to kind of really advise on what works and what doesn't, and how do you really move the needle, even in bite-sized chunks, is what I've been trying to focus on over the past.
It's interesting you brought up. You've got all the war wounds from doing this. It's not easy, right? It's kind of messy.
It is indeed. It's quite messy, right? So starting from what truly customers need, how do you navigate the ecosystem externally? How do you rewind and unwind some of the legacy systems that you have in place? But beyond the legacy systems, how do you kind of unwind some of the legacy processes that you have in play that you're doing, both back office functions, middle office functions, and how do you even interact with your customers, with your regulators, with your vendors, etc. And then to top that up, you've got this disruption in the marketplace that's going on, which adds to the noisiness, including inflationary pressures, including competitive forces. And to top that up, all the digital forces and the AI and Gen AI and some of the agentic...
Oh, yeah, it's got to be hard to stay on top of things. I've noticed talking to a lot of people, especially the big companies, are huge targets for disruption because of generative AI. A small company with a small sales force can act almost 100 times their size and compete with big companies in capturing customers from them. They can look a lot bigger. There's a lot going on here. How in the world does a large corporation stay nimble and transform to keep up.
And there are three things that we're starting to look at. A is, where do you start, right? So is it just a system implementation, be it SAP or Oracle or Salesforce that you're implementing? And if so, is that an isolated technology implementation, which sometimes companies attempt to go with, or is it fundamentally inventing their business models and how you go to market and start to really fulfill the needs of the customers in a very competitive environment? Or third is, how do I simplify the organization so I can be more nimbler and actually meet the market for needs and the market forces that are coming into play? But so those are the three things that are kind of top of mind. And when you start to bring that in the mix, really taking a step back and saying, okay, what is the value that we're starting to look at? Is it customer growth? Is it profitability? Is it shareholder value? Or is it a specific need of the customers that is not being fulfilled, versus when you've got these new comers in the marketplace, that as you quickly mentioned, the startups and some of the forces that are coming into play that are fulfilling a particular consumer need. So those are the type of things that you kind of really start to put it together and take a step back and figure out, okay, how do you really dissect this and put a strategic roadmap that really adheres to those specific objectives that you have in play with your board and with your strategy in play.
Do you see that strategy and these roadmaps that you put together? Do you see their timeline, their time horizons much shorter now than they used to be, because competition is so fierce out there and things are moving so fast? Or will that thrash your organization too much to move too quick that you don't get anything done? You know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, listen, it depends on the maturity of an organization, and it also depends on the
Okay.
size scope of the organization. So let's take two discrete examples. Example A is a large global consumer markets company, Fortune 50, that's got a global scale, right. So a company of that size, $50 billion plus, $100 billion plus in revenues, has a particularly different mandate in how you steer the ship and how long it takes to steer the ship, versus someone who's in a PE portfolio company that's just trying to start turn around and increase value and increase their multiples, right? So that's more in the sweet spot of about $5 to $15 billion company size, right? That's focused on growth, that's focused on profitability, and how do you to kind of increase the multiples. On the first part, it is a multi-year journey. It is a 3 to 5 year journey. It has to, but as long as it's tied to the 3 or 5 prong pillar strategy, and if you can bifurcate that into bite-sized chunks, and then that further gets dissected into value drops that are potentially quarterly value drops, that then starts to add value, versus an initiative that just there's never ending and just
Never ending initiatives. Yeah.
right?
There's no patience for that anymore. Let's talk about generative AI. Just we're only 2 years and 4 months into it. 2 years and 4 months into the generative AI marketplace. And look how much it's changed. And those companies that launched it, like OpenAI, Microsoft's in there, all these, their strategy is still solid, right? Do you think their strategy has had to change because of it? But they're releasing things very quickly as things progress. How do I translate that velocity into these quarterly deliverables that you're talking about? Because most big corporations I've worked with, they can't handle that. You're lucky if you get anything out of them in 2 years, right?
Yeah,
With
in our recent PwC survey, right, there are two anecdotes that I want to kind of highlight. One is embedding new technology Gen AI and some of these automation, agentic automation, etc., which is the new buzzword these days, is a high strategic priority. And how do you embed those into their business model as you continue to grow across the levers is critical, and it's one of the top 3 or 5 strategic priorities for the next 3 to 5 years. So that's thing one. Second, with that in the and as a context, 80% of the executives still struggle to capture value from their technology or digital investments. So when you have those two things, it is a top priority because they know that it's going to that is
They know if they don't, they perish, right?
and then but 80% of them or plus executives are still struggling to capture value. So so that's the conundrum, and what we're seeing is a few things, right? If you look at an SAP implementation as an example, $50 to $100 million investment across the board, that's great, fantastic, it's needed. You've got to move away from your legacy systems, absolutely. However, if you just focus on an SAP implementation, by and large, you're not going to capture the value across the holistic ecosystem and enterprise. Similarly, if you look Gen AI and implement Gen AI or some of these next gen automation capabilities, again, just point solutions are barely going to give you a 1 to 3% uplift, let's say from a cost perspective, but it's not really fundamentally shifting your business model, and so it's not really
So
tech. It's
where are you going to get that big? Because there's huge promise. There's a lot of investment in SAP, a lot of investment in AI tools and things like that. Where am I going to get my ROI that says 10x in 3 years?
yeah.
That's right. That's now I will invest in it. Where am I going to get that? Where is that coming from then? If
So
it's not the tech.
what we're seeing here, Darren, is a few things, right? Reducing both tech debt along with process debt is
No one
critical
talks
to,
about process debt,
right?
Mohib. I love that term because it's rarely even talked about. Process debt, I think, is the biggest albatross around organizations' necks.
Bingo. And I think you just nailed it, right? Because if you just implement a new technology, if you just implement Gen AI or agentic automation or leverage
Yeah.
data
So what?
sector, that's just a point solution and it's just solving, it's a band aid to a particular problem. It's not really reimagining your business processes and innovating with digital tech, such as Gen AI and some of the component technologies that we talked about, right? So if you take a step back to reduce your process debt, it's looking at an integrated solve or solution. It's reimagining your business processes across the end-to-end value chains, if you will. 2, it is looking at once you do have those digital enablement and embedded in your businesses or functions, then what is the resultant operating model and the associated org design that needs to come out of it or the associated function. And then third is how do you really change the organization and what are the core metrics that you measure for value capture versus, hey, I've got it implemented, I've got 10 Gen AI tools implemented in a particular processes, right? So I think looking at it holistically from an op model perspective, from a change management perspective, and from a business processes and tackling process debt is really key to capturing the significant value and the value arbitrage that companies are not getting these days.
This reminds me a lot of the things I studied in business school around technical management and process reengineering. And you can't improve something you're not measuring, first off. And you also need to know what value you're really trying to drive from the change that you're implementing. So those are really fundamental, basic things. And are you finding that, just like what you said, are you finding that most organizations are forgetting about that and they're just chasing the shiny objects,
I think
or
some,
that there's no appetite for it? Where is the problem?
I think it's a two-prong issue. One is, yes, you are chasing the shiny objects. How can investing significant dollars on next gen technologies or platform changes, et cetera, and trying to change the core. I think that's one of the solutions that companies have to invest and do. But I think it's breaking the silos and the barriers and starting to look across functions. So let's take an example like corporate functions. So human resources, HR, or finance, or procurement, or supply chain for that matter, right? If you look at that holistically across the individual value chain, right? So HR as an example, the entire hire to retire process versus just bits and pieces of talent acquisition or offboarding or onboarding, etc., right? When you look at the holistic process, it not only eases the pain of and the challenges of your human resources executives and
Right.
stakeholders, but it also simplifies the lives of your employees. And what we've seen is, it gives you, even when you kind of look at tackling process debt for each of these corporate functions, leveraging digital enablement with those new next-gen technologies, it could give you almost a 30% plus efficiency in addition to 10 to 15% uplift in employee experience. Now, that is massive.
That's huge. Yeah.
Because if you just implement a point solution, that's going to give you anywhere from 3 to 5% cost efficiency. And that too, over a long, elongated time period, because you're never going to get the end-to-end experience.
Why do you think it is that people just go to the point solutions more than looking at full systems architecture? Because what you're talking about is a holistic view of the system instead of I'm just putting in an HR chatbot, right? You're looking at the whole HR process, the whole HR organization as a whole, or maybe even beyond that, maybe an enterprise architecture view of things. Why are not organizations, why have they gotten away from doing that? Because they used to be in the 90s, maybe even in all the way in the 2000s, they were doing that sort of thing, but they kind of got away from it. You don't see it nearly as much. Why do you think that's the case? Why have we been pushed to point solutions here and there?
It's a few elements that are in play. It's how can I get something out the door quicker? And even if it's a smaller value, it's better than getting stuck in a rabbit hole across the entire life cycle, right? So that's thing one. That's the notion. That's the right. The second piece is organizations and operating models sometimes are in operating in a silo. Let's take HR as an example. In this day and age, if you look at a Fortune 50, 100 company, part of the HR process is residing within the CHRO function. Part of the process is residing in the IT function for
Right.
all, and part of the process is
Even
residing
in facilities. Right.
exactly
Yeah.
in the businesses. And take that further now with GBS organizations in play. You've got part of the organization and operation, HR operations sitting in GBS. So when you start to take a step back, now that HR process that could have been one end-to-end value chain is now in specific bits and pieces across four different organizations. So how do you break the silos and actually look at it horizontally versus vertical chunks?
So that's the problem then, right? It takes more time, and organizations don't have the patience to do that. Is that the problem that we're having?
That is a one fundamental challenge. Yes. However, what we're seeing as I'm having conversations with several executives, they are now starting to look at how do I. They've tried and tested a few things, but how do I really look at the horizontal approach and the end-to-end value chains? Because you've already adopted point solutions. You've already changed processes. You've already captured the labor arbitrage from moving functions into GBS and offshore, nearshore locations. So what's next? How do you start to but that's not simplifying your process debt. That's not simplifying your organization nimbleness. So what's next? How do you really capture value and continue to and move the needle on shareholder value as well, right? Without disrupting the needs of the customers and the need and your vendor interactions, if you will.
All right, so that is the conundrum, especially in large corporations. I don't have time to improve my processes, to get rid of process debt, to get rid of technical debt, because I've got something I have to deliver some value next month, either to my shareholders or to my customers, whatever the case may be. Ultimately, though, all that debt that you've piled up is weighing you down, and you become lethargic, and
Correct.
you can't move. So you gotta cut. You gotta cut sometime, right? Or you end up in a situation that we're seeing with large corporations that are going through this transition right now, where they're just bleeding customers because they can't move fast enough, and we're seeing that in some very large companies, right?
Agreed. And I think a classic example in consumer markets, whether it be food and beverages or whether it be in the retail outlets, et cetera, or quick service restaurants, pricing has become a key issue, right? Coming out of COVID, the only lever that
Yeah.
everyone had was with all this restricted supply chains, you just blanket focused on price increases, right? And now you've captured every single marginal improvement in pricing, but customers are now getting to a point where they're saying, okay, either if is this really a necessity, or do I look at the newest substitute for that particular product, or for that matter, not even have it, right? So I think but if you again on pricing specifically, or even for that matter, promotions. Our clients and executives are now starting to revisit how does revenue management come into play, right? How do you start to look at pricing and promotions effectively that looks at the elasticity of the customer, right? So that you don't have a drop in volume, if you will, right? And to do that, you've got to look at, again, your product. You've got to look at the geographical lens. You've got to look at the customer segment lens. And then behind the scenes, look at the whole end-to-end value chain associated with your supply chain and some of the other components that go into pricing, versus just focusing on a simple price increase or vanilla price increase across the board, across the different channels.
So that's interesting. Do you think AI and generative AI can unleash new pricing, elastic pricing models for products more effectively now? Because when you were talking about that, I was thinking, oh my goodness, they could start looking at more trends, changing pricing models based off of when people get their paycheck in certain geographies, in all these things. Do you see those types of tools coming into play on pricing and targeted marketing more than what
Yeah,
we've already seen?
Indeed, revenue, and as a result, especially in consumer markets, right, or some of the telecom space where you've got large subscriber base or large consumer base, revenue management has become a very important topic these days, given the inflationary pressures, right? Almost about 50,
Right.
and if you look at the CPG industry, nearly 15 to 30% of the CPG profit pools are at risk, and consumer product companies are also facing volatility in terms of channel disruption. You're seeing consumer preferences change. There's a lot of price volatility going on, and so we're starting to see that. How do you, as an example, over 60% are trading up to larger packs, and a third are trading down to smaller packs in the stores. So all those elements now starting to be incorporated as you're thinking through your pricing, and innovating how you do a pricing has become important. So data science coming into play, machine learning coming into play, AI coming into play, bringing in both customer preferences but going down to the zip code level and understanding the consumer needs
Wow.
and the preferences at that level of granularity really helps define and design what the right pricing should be and what pricing approach should be. And then you take that and start looking at your promotions and offers and marketing. The world is your oyster, right? And imagine what you could do to really get more money for your for the customers and more value for our customers, but also more value for your shareholders in conjunction to that.
So as we move forward with digital transformation, it's going to unleash new techniques that we've never seen before. It's going to give us more capability to do those things, but still yet organizations are having a hard time adopting these things. Does it require major culture change, do you think, or is it primarily process where you see most of the issues? I would say this is where my argument kind of falls on itself or folds in on itself. That some people would say that process is a offshoot of the culture of the organization. So anytime you go and touch one of those processes, you could be, you know, there are sacred cow processes in organizations that the people will flip out if you change, right? So do you see the two really intertwined that tightly? Or can I go and make those kinds of changes without making a big, huge cultural change in an organization?
Yeah, and culture, change management, and adoption, all those things have to come into play, and are critical for success, right? However, what we're seeing is this cannot be just a one-off project. It has to be part of your strategic pillar. It has to be a board mandate. You've got to bring your board along. You've got to bring your C-suite top level leadership along. And you've got to have specific functions and specific organizations that are key to this be part and parcel of the whole journey. Otherwise, it's not going
to apply. You're not going to have the air cover you need to do it.
Correct.
Right. So that brings up an interesting question that I've been asking myself recently as I watch large organizations go through these shifts and get hammered in the stock market. Is it maybe best when you're going through a big digital transformation to do what Michael Dell did with Dell and go private? So you can have the time, you don't have that extra visibility into your organizational change that can cause a lot of disruption. What are your thoughts on that, Mohib? Does that help at all, or it just painting over the problem?
It depends again, right? So if you look at Walgreens as an example, Walgreens has decided to now go private. They did go through multiple rounds of transformations, and this is all
all public information.
Public information, right? But if you look at the most recent news, they are going private, right? And there's so it depends from industry and industry to industry. Depends on the size of the company. Obviously, if it's a Fortune 50, 100 company, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, go private. No.
But if it's a portfolio-based company in a PE firm that could be potentially acquired by a PE firm, that's where that we could see some deals happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, hey, this has been really insightful. All the different factors that are involved. I think a lot of people don't understand the financial aspects of these and the business aspects of change, which you've brought on into play today. They just look at technology. Hey, that you need to do that, right? Everyone needs a Gen AI strategy, but without some value behind it, I think it falls on its face. So thank you, Mohib, for coming on the show today and giving us a new insight. If people want to find out more, where do they go?
Yeah, Darren, a few areas. There's obviously pwc.com that they can go in and you can look at digital value transformation. My information on LinkedIn is up there, and there's a lot of points of views and blogs and posts over there. So those are the two areas we can kind of take a look at as people have questions.
Awesome. Hey, Mohib, this has been insightful. I learned a lot today, so I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and embrace the digital revolution.